everybody. My name is Doreen Gebbia, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Robert Heiss, who is an expert business and sales consultant with over 25 years of experience as an entrepreneur working with startups and large international companies. So, Bob, can you give us a brief synopsis of your work experience, please?
Sure. I've been in sales my whole life, right after, upon graduating from college, and spent many years in the textile business. About 25 years ago, I started my own consulting company in conjunction with Sandler Training. So I did sales training and sales consulting. I sold that about 2 years ago and have since been currently been setting up strategic advisory boards, which are groups, peer-to-peer consulting where each member acts as the other's board of directors. And we also set up joint ventures between companies. So that's what's been keeping me busy.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Can you shed a little insight, Bob, for me and for the people listening on where you derive your inspiration from to, especially through this time, to work with your clients through this pandemic?
Right. So I have I have a couple of challenges. One is I'm advancing in age now, so it takes an extra inspiration for me during normal times. But during COVID times, it is of course even a bigger challenge. And personally, my inspiration comes from seeing everybody else do their job. In particular, there's certain heroes out there at this particular time. Those are the nurses and the doctors, the fire department, the policemen, the EMS people, the grocery store clerks, the people that pick up the garbage. I mean, these people are heroes because they're making society work through a particularly bad period. But I also derive a lot of inspiration from seeing people passionate about their own positions in life, about their own jobs. When I talk with business owners these days, and I see that they are just pushing ahead with whatever strength they have, and looking at the future in an optimistic way, it makes me think that we're not doing anybody any good whatsoever by sitting around and feeling sorry for ourselves. We really need to have that optimistic, glass is half full, there are opportunities that will be happening kind of a perspective. So that's really my inspiration, is seeing other people's passion.
Well, I have experienced that it's your passion that kind of inspires my passion. You know, I mean, you and I've had the pleasure of working with you for the last 15 or so years, and even through this crisis. And sometimes I get on the phone and I'm just not feeling it at all. And it's because of the people that you bring to the table, and it's because of the wisdom that you share and the passion that you share that I also am fed. So I appreciate that.
Well, I find that a person's passion towards towards a goal, their passion towards making something happen or fixing something that's broken is probably 80% of the battle. I mean, showing up and having that passion is a huge factor, a huge success factor. And if you don't have that, you have to find a way to get it. And people do that in various ways. Again, my energy comes from other people. What I see happening with them. I think reading and investigating other people's the way they think, either philosophically or practically, is a very good practice, and just being open to other methods, other approaches.
Right, being open-minded. I agree completely, and it's a challenge to be open-minded. What do you?
Well, yeah, it is these days. It is, but it's really the way to go. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think it keeps you also young. You know, to be open-minded. You're young at heart.
Banking on that, Doreen.
Yeah.
I'm putting all my energy into that. Yeah.
Well, it's working. What do you
I hope so.
Yeah, definitely. What are you finding, Bob, today, like when you work with the different businesses and the different size businesses, what are you finding across the board to be their biggest challenge at this particular time or challenges?
Well, it varies depending. Yeah, it varies on depending on their marketplace, their business, but also on their perspective. And I think a lot of people are looking at these challenging times in one of three ways. Number one, or one way that people look at it is they look at where we are right now and are doing everything possible to go back to the way it was 4, 5, 6 months ago.
Mhm.
And in some cases that may be practical. I suspect that in most cases there's going to be have to be a lot of changes, but I think that they have a high degree of anxiety and are just very frustrated and frankly fretting about how they're going to recapture what they think they lost or what they did lose. So that's one bucket people are in. The second bucket is that people are now just trying to survive, just do anything to generate some cash flow, either keep people on the payroll or keep people happy and healthy. Because look, if you own a business, you're responsible for your employees' families as well as your employees when you think about it.
Yeah.
So so they are just they are in survival mode and just doing what it takes to get from today to tomorrow. And then the third group are people that are somewhat forward-looking. They regard this kind of a downturn as a shift in way to do business. They realize that there's going to be a pivot, and they notice that perhaps in previous downturns, as things change, as normalization and stabilization happen, some of the methods of doing business will change. Other markets will open up. If you can create new products to fill some voids that will be developing, that's great. So I think that those people are optimistically looking at what they can do going forward. Now clearly, everybody probably fits into one of those boxes or buckets at one time. There's probably a hybrid version of that, but that's the way it is. Now, the people I see being the most successful are, and I've been pushing or consulting with people around their plans. One other way to look at the world is it's either being done to you or you're doing it, or you're taking care of itself. In other words, you're either part of somebody else's plan or you're part of your own plan. So many people don't have plans in good times, and in bad times, it's probably even worse. So I think a very frank examination of your own companies and perhaps your own personal strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And when I say frank, I mean a good hard look without pulling the wool over your own eyes, to evaluate where you are and what some of the opportunities could be. Creating a business plan essentially around those opportunities, taking into account your weaknesses and threats, and your, of course, your strengths. But I think creating a business plan around perceived opportunities and applying that to a timeline and moving forward with that plan is the way to go. And I think that works for a couple of reasons. I think that in these times when we are feeling very emotional and feeling very anxious and in the midst of losing stuff, it pays to it's great to have a plan, and in that plan it's wonderful to be able to work on small things, get some accomplishments under your belt, and move forward. One of the things that we learned, my partner and I learned way back in from 9/11 and in particular and the Hurricane Sandy and some of these other events, was that in the midst of a shutdown, you have to stay busy. You have to have small little projects, small little things to get done. And that ranges for everybody, anywhere from calling your clients and making sure you're connected with them, calling up your friends and making sure that they're okay. It could be straightening out your files once and for all, figuring out your books and getting them figured out. It could be that kind of stuff, or it could be forming a plan, breaking that plan into little weekly sprints, and working on accomplishments per week, and celebrating those accomplishments as you go along. Now, at first, they're not going to be that big, really, but they will give you the sense of moving forward. And I think that can keep your head in the game, and that will keep your passion ignited.
So what I hear you saying, well, there was quite a few things. One is the SWOT, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So to use that when you're looking at your business to create that plan. And I think this is kind of a subset plan of your business plan, because no one was planning on something like this, because we've never experienced anything.
There is no plan. There's no pandemic plan.
Right, exactly. So now going forward, that's a different story, but there is none, or there wasn't one. So I've been finding that your suggestion about doing little things, having smaller tasks that are part of a bigger plan, really does help to be able to cross that off my list and say, I accomplished that today. I accomplished this. You know, the difference of working on my business rather than in my business.
That's a good perspective. And I think of it like this. I know you are, and a number of people viewing this probably are familiar with the Agile project management system. And in the Agile system, you're basically looking at the desired future state. Where do you want to be at a particular time at a particular date? I mean, well, I guess in software development is what do you want to build and what do you want it to do?
Right.
But in terms of running a company or some of the softer skills, softer sides of the company, it's really what do you want the future state to look like, feel like, and produce. So once you have that picture, it's really a matter of breaking that into smaller components that can be worked on in what the Agile people call sprints. And those sprints are meant to be very measurable, objective things with specific outcomes that happen on a periodic basis, weekly, monthly. I particularly like weekly because I don't think the ship goes very far off course in a week. In a month or a quarter, it can be way off course.
Yeah.
So and we all need small wins, and so accomplishing those sprints on a weekly basis makes you feel good. It actually does move the ball forward down the field. And if you look at it in a healthy way, I think even failing at those sprints or those tasks is still good. It's still healthy because you just found a way that it's not going to work. You just reboot. And as I said, a week is not that big a deal. You just reboot, you're back in the game, and you're moving forward. The sense of accomplishment is that you have a damn cookbook and you're working that cookbook.
What do you find, like, for yourself, you know, in terms of, like, you know, I know we've talked a little bit about fretting and paralysis and movement and, you know, the anxiety that this time brings. If you had to give like 2 steps to get past that when you're stuck, then when you're just trapped in it, what do you do?
Well, I think that the 2 issues that a lot of people struggle with, and I, as much as anybody, probably more than most, struggle with 2 really important things: motivation and accountability. Right. So you got to look at yourself and say, well, how do I motivate myself?
Yeah.
Everybody's got a different way to do that. As I said earlier, I get a lot of my energy from people. So my motivation comes basically from telling people what my future state looks like. I tell them what my plans are. I tell them what I'm trying to get done, even on my sprint this week. And I feel that going public with that certainly motivates me, because the last thing I want to hear from family member, friend, business associate next week. I don't need them saying to me, hey, by the way, that sprint, how'd you do with that? And me saying, I really didn't do anything.
Mm.
That doesn't feel good. So I work on that negative motivation myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that also provides the accountability that I need, and I think everybody needs. And that accountability is, like I told you I was going to do it, so I got to do it.
Yeah.
So so those are two critical psychological tools that, if you know about them and accept them, you can use them to manipulate yourself into productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And so forth. And look, I think even people with addiction kinds of problems, I think that approach is also a fairly powerful approach in telling people that, hey, here's my goal, and once I tell you that I'm not going to drink anymore, if you see me with a drink at a party, I'm going to feel like a schmuck. It's not going to. So I think there's a lot. I think if we can get our heads wrapped around motivation, what motivates us, and the accountability piece, you can do it.
Yeah. I find that's a big one for me, holding myself accountable. I mean, I do that very much so. So if I haven't accomplished something and it just hangs on my head, that procrastination is just not good for me. So I have to.
Oh, you see, we're different in that way, because I can let myself off the hook all day long.
Oh my God, I wish I could do that.
But other people won't let me do it because I set it up that way, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So
the point of this, Doreen, this part of the conversation is that, we're all motivated by different things. And I think figuring out what actually motivates you and what does help you hold yourself accountable is part of the key to being successful in any kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Know yourself, I guess, is the deal.
Yeah, I think Socrates said that too. That's quite profound. Know thyself.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you this before we wrap up.
Yeah.
If you were going to recommend different books that have inspired you in your course of being an entrepreneur, a business owner, a coach, a consultant, what would you say, 1, 2, 3 of those books would be?
So I've got 3 books that kind of have been my sort of go-to books. One is there's an author, Daniel Pink, and Daniel Pink has written a number of books. The one that kind of anchored me was called Drive, D-R-I-V-E. You can see there's a lot of Daniel Pink on YouTube and TED Talks and those kinds of things. And he's all about motivation, accountability, goal setting. And that book, Drive, explains a lot of what goes on inside of us, helps us understand ourselves, but it's also extremely powerful in helping us understand other people. And one of the biggest realizations from that book, of course, is that what motivates me doesn't motivate other people, and what works holding me accountable doesn't work for other people. So what does? And when you start to talk with people and really listen to them and kind of look in their eyes and figure it out, you can understand. And he helps in a great way with that, a great deal with that book. From a technique and selling standpoint, I like Sandler, because I was part of the Sandler training organization for 22 years. So those books, specifically, You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar, explains an awful lot about the psychology of selling, which is ultimately the psychology of communication. So selling really is communication, and I think that's communicating well is the key to a lot in this world. And then from my philosophical side, there's a lot of space inside of there. So from my philosophical side, I like a book. It's somewhat obscure now. It was printed back in, I think 93 or 96, somewhere in that range. It's called the Tao, T-A-O of Sales. It's written by Thomas Behr, B-E-H-R. That takes it's a very Zenish, very mindful approach to selling, and again to communication. So it's for the philosophical amongst us. So I figured that those three books give me a way to understand myself, understand others, and have some communication techniques. So that's where I go.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great spread, of different sort of verticals, but all to get to the same point.
Right. And that of course, and I've got my normal, like everybody does, my normal crime novels and spy novels and all that stuff. And those are just fun. But philosophically, those are my three go-tos.
Well, I feel like I got a lot of this conversation, because, well, first of all, you talked about the SWOT, you talked about a business plan, you talked about the books that inspire you, holding yourself accountable, having that motivation. And I think that last point that you made is communication, how important communication is.
Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating to me, because it's just amazing that anything gets done, because there's so many nuances to communication.
And what bothers me about communication is people mostly think that communication is me framing my message in a way that you can understand it. And that's really not it. Communication is really me taking the effort and setting the stage so I can understand you. That's really where what communication, I believe, is about. And that also sets up a trust between us. Because if I'm just telling you my ideas and communicating with you in a very hard manner, this is what you should believe, how does that's not even communication. How does that even work?
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you just one last question. Now that everybody's Zooming, as our form of communication in the business world, and even with our friends and family, of course, but this is just from a business point of view. Mm-hmm. Is there something that you're finding as a communication expert, really, and a business expert, that any tips around that in terms of the Zooming experience?
Well, besides the obvious, don't have a poor background, make sure you're framed, look into the camera so people don't see you looking all over the place, besides, and don't wear your pajama tops. Besides all of that stuff, I think a lot of it is just getting over ourselves, getting over the whole aspect. In a way, it's like meditation, right? You sit around and you're meditating, you're thinking to yourself the whole time, I'm meditating. Mm-hmm. That's not useful. What's useful is letting go. I think on Zoom. What's that?
Were you in my meditation this morning?
No, is that what you were talking about? No, but I think that in communicating on Zoom, it's the same thing. You got to forget that you're standing in your garage or your studio or something, and communicate with people as if they were in front of you. Now that takes a little bit of effort, because you really do have to let go of that. But ultimately, it's the same thing. Once again, if I spend, with the exception of this interview, if I spend my whole time just coming at you with stuff, it's not helpful. You can do the same thing you can on Zoom that you can face to face. It's a matter of getting used to it. And I got to tell you, I've seen since this whole thing started, 6, 8, 10 weeks ago, whatever it was, with Zoom, all of a sudden zoomed into popularity. I've seen people's skills and communication abilities get just way better.
Interesting. That's fascinating to me. And I have found that in my experience, people are relaxing more. So if their cat pops up or their dog barks or their kids, there's not that panic of, oh my gosh, I'm a real person, I have a real life, and it's coming into the frame, It's
I've seen a lot of that.
It's okay.
No, I've seen an awful lot of that, and I also love the fact that people are somewhat dressed down and are in their elements. Nice to see somebody's pictures on the wall and what they're doing. I mean, it all makes us more human. And man, isn't that what we need during these times? Is that element, that connectedness. So
Right. And I
I
promise
think it's a good thing. Plus, you don't have to go anywhere, so that's pretty good too.
I like that too. I promise one last thing. New normal.
Yeah.
What does it look like to you?
I don't know.
Mm.
The new normal in my business is different than a new normal will be in your business. It's different everywhere. But I think the new normal for society is going to be way more. I would like to think that humanistic connectedness that I was just talking about, that is visibly happening on Zoom. I would like to think that continues. People get better at that, and a lot of that previous just phone call communication turns into a face-to-face conversation. I would like to think that's part of the new normal. Obviously, there's going to be a very slow, particularly in the New York area, very slow regeneration of face-to-face meetings, people congregating together for events. I assume it's going to happen gradually, but nobody's going to go out there and volunteer to be the first one to get sick again. Mm. So there's going to be a lot of nervousness about that, and I think one of the most important things, and I hope we're learning this, but although I kind of get the feeling we're not, is we really need to have respect for other people's views. And if they are germaphobes and like to wear masks, in the shower, cool. And if they're less so and have different opinions, okay, got it. But I think we need to really respect each other's perspectives, viewpoints, because all of us are affected both health-wise and economy-wise in different ways. Everybody's got a different deal going on. So, we just again, part of the humanistic connection part thing. Mm-hmm. Just got to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bob. I really appreciate you spending this time. I so appreciate the insights that I gleaned today. And if it's okay with you, I'll share your email address and some of the that you recommended at the end of this, so people can access them and you if they'd like. Okay with you?
Cool.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, Doreen. I appreciate it. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for all your time, and be well.